Just Fix It in Post is fueled by the donut. Whether you're law enforcement doubling down on tradition, a multitasking parent seeking some sweet silence, or producer looking for a morale boost on set, get the donut. For the sweetest updates, you can follow them on Instagram at The Donut San Pedro. Located at 1615 South Daffy Street, 562-881-0656. Get The Donut. Serving San Pedro for the last 45 years. The Donut. Damn, that's good. Just Fix It in Post.
Okay, this is a career.
He was like creative director is an approach.
Wow.
Fucking A. I am absolutely there.
Clients wanting more for less.
Dude.
This mix of creativity and technology.
Tweet heard around the world. People were freaking out.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post. Industry insights straight from the source. I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome. He's a creative visionary with a knack for turning insights into campaigns that truly connect. He's VP Group Creative Director, known for his sharp style and a way with words that could sell sand in the desert. He's shaped unforgettable work for brands like Toyota, AT&T, and Chevy. As a co-host of the Invisible Soldiers podcast, he's also amplifying underrepresented voices in advertising. Let's dive in with Corey Seaton.
Hello.
What up, man? How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you on. One, because I've had the privilege of working with you for, I feel like, a while now. I feel like it's been a long time. The subject in which you work in is a very debatable topic these days in terms of marketing towards specific audience and really being able to connect with them. First off, I would love to know how you got into this, where you started. And, maybe we kind of wonders like, why advertising? How did you become a creative director? What led you down that path? So yeah, man, give it a whirl.
I was lucky and I'm unique in that I grew up in a house with somebody in advertising. So I got to see it right from the time I was a little kid on up. I had never seen anything like that. It seemed like the coolest job in the world. My dad traveled. My dad was an executive producer. My dad came into advertising as, a mailroom guy, worked his way up from the mailroom to the studio. He finally made it to the actual department floor where things really went down. And then, he started his career as a little kid. I got to see copywriters, art directors. I got to be around these people who were also young and on the come up, seeing the whole rise of it. Like it was very thrilling, So it was a creative field. I would catch wind of the business side. I knew what kind of numbers they were working with. You know what I mean? That was always like, that would wow me. But, the celebrity thing, like really as a kid, I was all into that. I grew up on a block where I saw men go to work in uniforms. Some of them wore name tags, some of them wore ties, some of them wore suits. My dad was the only one wearing blue jeans, and was considered in corporate America. So that was just different, So I was like, Dad, I think I want to do something like that.
Where were you at this time?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. And how old are you when you first kind of like understood what it was that your dad was doing?
I'd say about 6 or 7 is when I really started paying attention to it. At that time, even more so than the TV stuff, the radio was such a big part of my life and our household. My dad would have these radio commercials that would be on all the time, and you would just hear them playing on the radio. And I knew that they were his work. That probably more than even some of the TV stuff at that time in my life was a big deal for me, right? Like he did stuff where he worked with a bunch of different music groups, and they had this campaign where they redid the Budweiser jingle. It was "This Buzz for You." So he did it with the Temptations. He worked with Rick James. He worked with everybody, it seemed like, on this campaign. And so that was a big deal.
So how did advertising play into who you were in terms of being able to elevate yourself and enrich your life with what you wanted to do?
Well, what it showed me is that, like, as a Black man in this country, there was a path to taking care of myself and potentially my family one day. That was something I would say by the time I got to high school, I started feeling a lot of anxiety about is like, how am I going to take care of myself? What am I going to do? We used to always talk about, I'm going to get paid. Like I remember my dad asked me, look, what do you want to do when you grow up? I was like, I want to get paid. He's like, ain't no job called getting paid, dude. Either you going to get serious about finding something or you not going to get paid, right? So once I figured that out, it's like, okay, I got to do something. I got to make this get paid thing happen. I saw friends struggling with what they wanted to do. A lot of it was their parents were pushing stuff on them. I want to be an architect. Nobody wanted to be an architect, man. Nobody wanted to be. Nobody wanted. I mean, you know, I didn't know anybody who wanted to be an architect. I mean, I knew a dude who wanted to be an engineer, and he stood out like a sore thumb. You know what I mean? Most people were just kind of getting pushed into directions that their parents were pushing them, things that sounded good, but I didn't see a lot of people with a passion for something like hardcore, right? I think I started developing a passion for writing. I always did really great in English. I liked reading. I liked dissecting philosophy. I liked dissecting writing and like what was behind it, the thinking behind it, right? I would say by the time I was probably into high school, early college, I was going back to advertising. I was going, wait a minute, there is a path here that I could be a writer here, right? I was thinking about screenplay writing as well. Dad started sharing movie screenplays. He introduced me to a friend of his who became a mentor of mine. He was a director. And he started sending me all these screenplays, right? It was the first time that I really connected in my mind that people actually wrote everything that you see on TV. You know, like you don't really think about it. You just sitting at home being entertained. And then when it hit me that, wait a minute, like somebody sat down and wrote this joke. Somebody sat down and wrote this storyline. Somebody sat down and wrote every word this person is saying. It changed the game for me. I couldn't see the world. I saw the world differently from that point on. Every billboard, even watching the news, that's when I first realized that these guys were reading a teleprompter. The idea of writing became way more important. And I started to see jobs around writing everywhere. And so that brought me back to advertising. And then after that, I knew what I wanted to do. I majored in English, and then I went to an ad school after undergrad.
Growing up, where you grew up, was there any pressure from your parents to do anything specific or?
My mom was a teacher. She did not want me to be a teacher. When I told her I was going to major in English, she was real pissed at me.
Really?
Real pissed at me. Yeah. You know, my parents raised us to be better than them, right? So in her mind, I don't want you to be, I was a teacher. Like you could be you have way more options than I had. My dad saw it a little bit different. He saw the value of corporate money without being a corporate person, if you will. He wanted us to have a personality. He wanted us to have friends. He wanted us to, my dad coined the phrase, a fun B sometimes is better than a hard A. And what he meant by that was sitting in, a vacuum in your room, getting an A and having no friends and no life and no fun is not going to make you ready for the real world. He's like, I would much rather you have a full life and bring home B's than, be this nerd that's awkward and doesn't know how to deal with real life, So my mom wasn't happy about that phrase, but like that was something that stayed with me.
When you're growing up, did race come up? Was it something that was discussed within your family, or like, did you see it impacting what your dad did?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my parents were both from Mississippi. They grew up picking cotton. I'm the first generation of people on either side of my family not to grow up picking cotton, right? Like I didn't grow up in a field. My parents both grew up in a field. They literally stepped out of a field into a whole new life that allowed me to never have to work in a field. So they were the generation that left the fields, went up Highway 55 from Mississippi, moved to the bigger city, right, St. Louis, and start a whole new life. That's a generation removed from two totally different lifestyles, right? So yeah, race was a huge part of it. My mom was an educator, a teacher. It's funny, my parents both went to HBCUs. They met at Mississippi Valley State University, right? When it came time to go to college, when we talked about HBCUs, my parents had two different takes on it. My dad was like, I don't care where you go. Like, you could get a great education at HBCU, get a great education anywhere else. My mom was like, you don't get to go to a HBCU. We went to a HBCU because that was the only choice we had. You are about to go compete with these white kids at the state schools. That competitive thinking, that kind of, you have to be better than everybody else in the room. those were kind of like, those civil rights lessons that I got.
It's that pressure of like, we brought the baton this far.
Absolutely.
You're obligated to take it even further.
That was a reoccurring thing that we talked about in our family all the time. My dad was always like, we started on the 10, we took it all the way to the other 10. All you got to do is get a touchdown. Now, if you can't run from the 10 into the end zone, that's on you. But like, we brought it this far, like it's up to y'all to take it and score. So that was an analogy he used all the time. So that was not missed on us.
So did you feel like there was a lot of pressure on you in terms of what decision you made growing up?
I didn't really see this pressure. I thought it was a real point of view. Yes, they did struggle really, really hard to get where they ended up, way more so than me. So I had advantages they never had, right? So the least I could do was live up to being the person who benefited from all of that, right? Who benefited from not having to, like my dad was a really good basketball player. Never got to play basketball in high school because the fall is harvest time. You know what I'm saying? So the coaches would.
It's mind blowing to think that it's so close. It's so close. It's literally right there. That experience, that life.
Yeah. No, he would talk about the coaches would come to the house and beg his dad. He was like, hey, I need him in the field. He can't go. And it was like that, Saving me from that, I always felt obligation to make good grades, not get into any street stuff that might end up put me in jail, that might put a stain on the name. Like I felt a huge obligation to do my part, if you will, because I felt like they had more than done their part. It was really important for me to pay for school. That was an important thing. I was lucky enough to get athletic scholarship, right? My sister, she paid for her own school. She had an academic scholarship. Because of how we were raised, we felt that obligation.
Did they ever instill in you that like, hey, you're going to face probably more challenges than everybody else because we're Black? Was that a conversation that came up?
No. Race was never talked about in that way. It was more about excellence. Like you are amazing. You can be anything you want to be, and you can compete with anybody out there. It was more like that. Right? It was never about what we didn't have. No, it was always about you are as good, if not better than anybody else out there. Don't be afraid to compete. Don't be afraid to go out there and prove it. That's the conversations we had.
So you're getting into college. You're off to go get your master's, right? In English? Is that what you were getting?
No. So I got an undergrad degree in English, but then I went to Portfolio Center in Atlanta. So it's a portfolio school. It's where I learned the ins and out about the industry, right? How to be a copywriter. It was a 2-year program broken down into 8 quarters. So at the end of every quarter, there's a portfolio review. You basically bring in all your best ads from that quarter. You walk into a room and there are 3 judges. You sit down at a table and you slide across your portfolio for that quarter, and they judge your stuff. And a lot of people walk out of portfolio reviews and they're getting sent home. Their stuff is not up to snuff pretty much. Luckily, every time I went through, I was being reaffirmed that okay, you're a talented writer. You got something. So I felt like, okay, I'm going to have a career. After a couple of quarters, I knew that okay, I'm built for this.
So you graduate and the world's your oyster. What do you do next? What's kind of
the world was not my oyster. Far from it. We had to do these reviews leaving school. And I showed him my portfolio and, he's critiquing it. And he's like, well, I think you'll get a job, but blah, blah, blah. And I had to tell him, I said, I'm not trying to be the Michael Jordan of advertising. I want a career where I can pay for my life and potentially take care of my family for the next 30, 40 years. I was like, that's why I'm doing this. And he thought that was a cop-out. He did not understand that answer at all. He was like, you should be in it for the awards. And I was like, no, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? I think it was a cultural clash in that moment, right? He had bought into advertising and I was buying into real life. That I was not going to have to work a construction job or work in a field, or I was going to be able to take care of myself. That was number one option for me, what I was into. All this other stuff, I was like, miss me with that, man. But he didn't see it that way. But anyway, I had a decent portfolio. We had a couple of portfolio reviews. where a bunch of agencies came down. They literally would put all the students who were graduating that quarter, they put their portfolios down. Headhunters and recruiters from agencies come in, they look at these portfolios and they go, who's that? I got a bunch of interviews from that. A couple places in Chicago, a couple places in Detroit, a place in Dallas. I ended up taking a job that offered me the least amount of money. They were like, if you come here, you won't be doing grunt work, you'll be doing real work. And you'll probably be shooting $1 million commercial within a year. And when they said that, I was like, I'm coming here, right? But that took me to Detroit and Campbell Ewald.
So what kind of work did they have for you there?
I got pulled into the Chevy National Group. There's probably about 30 creatives, so like 15 teams. There was a truck group and a car group at the time. And I got pulled into the truck group. This was a lot of senior people. It was me and my partner, 2 junior teams and everybody else. I got to see a lot of good work, award-winning work. But I didn't really get a chance to be around the creative. A lot of the creatives were like out shooting. You be around them for a little bit and they were gone, man. You see them dudes 6-7 weeks later. It wasn't like there was a lot of mentorship going on. People were busy. Like everybody was too busy for you. Just being in meetings, just being in the hallways, just being around, maybe even hanging outside people's offices. You could pick up a lot of little stuff, right? You pick up little lessons and everything.
Now, when you say like partners and teams, how does the project work exactly? Like what were some of the stuff you...
So I'm a copywriter. What they do is they team you up with the art director. That becomes your partner, right? That you two are tied at the hip. You concept together. You develop work together. Print, TV, radio stuff I was doing on my own. That's still the process we work with today, pretty much.
You guys are pitching projects, like something comes in and like a bunch of teams are working on it, or are they?
Well, no, you would get put on a project and a bunch, especially like in a group like that, everybody would get put on everything. So it wasn't like 2 or 3 people on this thing to it. It was like the whole department everything was up for grabs, right? So, and it's tough, man. Like when you're young, you gotta get in there and fight. You get blown out a few times, right? Then you like, okay, I don't like this feeling. Then you start showing up. Your work makes it to the 2nd round or the 3rd round, or you come up with a campaign and maybe it's not the preferred campaign, but at least you made the meeting, right? So it's like tiers to this thing, right? Like I got one of the top 3. Even though it's not the one, I made the client meeting. First, you just want to get chosen. Then you want to make the client meeting. Then you want to have the thing and get the sale. There are stages to it, and there are a lot of lessons to learn along the way.
What was one of the first things you landed on or that took off?
I remember the first big spot that I sold. I did this thing. It was like they used to have this thing called Chevy Player of the Game. And that was like the very first thing we did. But like we sold a big spot. I don't even know who worked on it against us or who we beat out. We sold this spot and it ended up being like my first like $1 million commercial that I sold. Right. And that was a big deal. That was a real big deal.
How old are you at this time?
Probably 26. No, I'm like, I'm 25, something like that. Yeah.
And are you just working on Chevy or are you working on other?
I'm working on Chevy. I'm working on, we had a bunch of clients. So you would get pulled in to work on something with a different group. And, so I worked on a lot of different stuff. Chevy was my main group. That was like my home. Everything else, I was just getting pulled in on.
Now you're a very calm and chill person to work with, as well as like just in general.
Yeah.
I imagine this type of environment extremely competitive. How are you thriving in this, or is it kind of like, or doesn't even faze you?
You used to it after being in portfolio school. Portfolio school was like a lot of talented people. And in many ways, school was harder than work. You're working on so many assignments. Managing your time was super hard. By the time we made it like into the actual field, the number of assignments was less than what we were doing in school. So it was a little easier. Now, what was harder was the pressure. Once you realize that you're dealing with people's livelihoods, if you beat this team out and you are this young junior who doesn't make any money, but the team you just beat out is a senior team that makes a lot of money, you just put a lot of pressure on them. You just put a lot of pressure on their boss. If that continues to happen, that dynamic is being exposed. It reminds me so much of the NBA, right? It's like a rookie comes in making no money and is lighting it up. Meanwhile, this dude who's making $30 million is getting exposed. Puts the whole franchise in a weird place, right? Like, are we getting behind the younger regime? Or are we going to stick with our old guy? Are we trading this guy? Like, so it gets tricky real fast. And those people aren't just about to let you beat them either. When people get desperate, like Fang show, this is my territory. You know what I mean? Like it comes out. That part was the part that was the wake up call.
So how do you go from copywriter to creative director?
I had a boss. Was it my first guy I reported to, but the second guy I reported to that came in, and he was like, you're going to be a creative director. That's what he told me. I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to do that. Like, I don't know if I'm going to still be in advertising, years from now, whatever. That was how I felt. He's like, nah, he was like, creative director is an approach. He's like, it's an approach to the work. And he's like, you have that approach. I could see it. You're going to be a creative director. I didn't really believe him. I was like, okay, thank you. But nah, I didn't even want that. To his point, it is kind of an approach. The minute you connect the dots between strategy, creative, being able to communicate with the client, suddenly you have entered the creative director space. Now, there's other things you got to do with team building and managing people and all of that stuff. If you communicate well, if you are good at organizing thoughts, it starts to put you in that lane. The majority of what we do is simplifying complex things so people understand it. And that's internally and externally. You know what I mean? Being the person who organizes the thoughts so everybody understands what's happening. Once you start to enter that space, you are starting to show some of the signs of a creative director. Now, there's like other facets of it too, but I think I was showing those signs and that's what he was picking up on.
So where did you end up being a creative director at?
I became an ACD at Kimberly Well before I left, and then I went to Sanders Wingo, and that's where I became a creative director.
Did you get to work with your dad?
We never worked on an assignment together. The weirdest thing was one time we ended up staying in the same hotel in LA. He was on the job, I was on the job. And it just happened to be during his birthday. His birthday hit that weekend, and neither one of us were working that weekend, and so we hung out that weekend. But like, it was the first time work brought us in close proximity to each other, but never worked on the same project or the same place, same time.
Getting recognition from your dad is one of the coolest parts about thriving in what you do. Did you have that moment?
My old man didn't give a damn. I mean, like my folks are real nonchalant about me my whole life. Like I did not have the parents that were just like, all on my tip and like, giving me all of that praise and stuff. Like, no, that like they went the opposite way. Right. But every now and then I would catch them on the phone talking to somebody else. And that's when I would hear them kind of like, they would never do it to me.
Funny.
But I would hear him to other people, oh, Corey doing his thing, like that kind of thing.
So so as a creative director, what were some of what's one of the big campaigns that you've worked on where you were like,
I don't know, man. This stuff always runs together after a while. When I became a creative director, I was working on AT&T. And AT&T was a fun time because we went through this whole like moment where people didn't have cell phones and then everybody had a cell phone, right? And that was kind of during that 2008 through 2017 is when I worked on AT&T. People were learning and starting to care more about network strength, 4G, 3G versus 4G versus 5G, all of that stuff, right? Having those conversations and download speed and like all of these things. We did a lot of work around that stuff and it was actually pretty fun. AT&T was a tough client though, like real tough client.
Throughout the years you've been doing this, has it always been done the same way?
No, not at all. Like the early days were very much old school. It was like old school advertising. My first client meeting, it was on some Don Draper type shit, right? Like I walked in with a board. I like held up a line, I freestyled some kind of thing. Then I flipped over a picture and then I flipped over a tagline. And that was like the presentation. Like it was real, it was flipping boards kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And it went from flipping boards to like, these 8-frame storyboard to what we do now, which was like a total digital presentation with all kind of references, and it's just a whole different thing now. I think advancements with the internet changed everything. When I first started, man, we would get these quick times. I remember this guy in our office. This was jacked up, but HR wasn't that serious. But this guy sent out a quick time. It was like a real jacked up thing. But he sent a mass email to all of us, and it was just a quick time thing. And so you click it, you get like a 12-minute download time. And then like all over the office, like one by one, you start hearing this hoarse noise. It's just But once we got past that slow internet and got more into YouTube era, where we were like connected by videos from everybody and all of that, that's where everything changed and took off, because that was the doorway into the real digital ad world. After that, everything changed, right? Before then, it was like all these big agencies. And the minute that digital world, the first digital ads that I was doing, we used to do these USA Today. There were banner ads. There would be like, if you went to the USA Today website, right, there'd be an ad at the top, or there would be like an ad in like the weather section, like a little banner ad, right, that would flip, and you have your logo and your headline and all of that stuff. That was the early digital stuff, but then it quickly changed the minute the websites got better, more dynamic, the ads got more dynamic. So you just saw everything start to change, and that's when all these digital agencies popped up. And after the digital agency boom, it didn't really matter where you worked anymore. It was about the clients and the work. It was less about the ad agency. And I think that trend has continued.
So what is it about now? I mean, what is it like now?
I think it's about the work. I think you can work anywhere. I don't think people are so blown away when you tell people where you work anymore, right? People used to name drop agencies or name drop creative directors back in the day. And people don't do that anymore. Like, it's about, what do you work on? I worked on this campaign. Oh, okay. It's more that than I work at this place, or, I work at this big, long time institutional ad agency. Like, nobody cares about that stuff anymore.
Is it about views at all?
Well, I mean, that's a part of the whole digital thing, but it's really about a successful campaign or a campaign that reached culture, that had an effect on culture. It's not really just about views, but it's about, did you create the thing that had people talking on Twitter? Did you create the thing that had people at bars quoting your commercial? Or, you know what I mean? Like, those are the moments that you're reaching for.
So the tools are changing now. How does that affect what you're doing?
Well, it's affecting everybody, man. I mean, AI has people inspired and scared, right? It's a new tool. People never know what to do with new tools. I read a lot of books about music. When the synthesizer came out, all the piano players freaked out. They're like, oh, this machine's trying to put us out of work. Same thing when the drum machine came out. Oh, the drum machine is going to put all the drummers out of work. It's not. So AI is like, people are freaking out. Like, is it going to put us out as creators out of work? Is it going to put actors out of work? Is it going to put directors out of work? Is it going to, these are the conversations people are having, because it's a brand new tool. It's getting better every day. Every day you see something that's AI, and you're like, damn, 3 months ago it couldn't do this, and now it's doing this. Where does this end? But I do think, like anything else, it's not the technology, it's how we use it. What are the ethics that we are going to put around the technology, right? What's ethical? Is it ethical to hear Michael Jackson singing a song he never sang, he never wrote? Like, is that ethical? Well, 2 or 3 months ago, I listened to a Tupac and Biggie album. AI. Is that, it's when you listen on YouTube, it's funny. Somebody's monetizing those clicks, right? Is it ethical? So where do we draw the line? What happens when all these major companies start doing broadcast spots and they're not hiring actors anymore? Everybody's AI. Is that ethical? I think these are the conversations that we're having. These are the conversations we need to continue to have. And where's the line between really cool art and doing something really cool versus overstepping the line? I see both sides of it. Like, I do think you need artists to push the technology to its limits so we can find out where it's too far, right? So we can find out what's not ethical. We're not going to know until we push the limits and we go, okay, hold up, that you went too far. But I don't think we know yet. I think it's too early to tell.
You know, in the episode I did with Sam Vanderforst a few episodes back, we brought up breaking the system. Some of the demands that come to content creators is we want more for less. And it was every year it's kind of come to a point where the ask is bigger, the budget's smaller, people keep asking for more and more stuff. And with this big push to do influencer content creator content as opposed to big commercial productions, which is where he was saying people are scaling back, that may have been kind of where it breaks, right? Where, well, all of a sudden, if we can't afford the big shiny commercial that people kind of are shying away from now, and we're able to make money off the content creator and influencer, why would a company go the other way around when they can just generate revenue doing it that way? How do you see that affecting you and what you do? And especially you're in a niche agency, right? Like you're looking to connect with a specific audience.
I think everybody is starting to see the value of micro-targeting, really getting in there and like, who's really buying this product? Who's really the influencer? If I figure out that the people who are influencing everybody else is really a group of people who are like 16 to 24, it would behoove me to micro target to that group and get them on my side, right? And say, I still value everybody else, but these are the guys I need to speak to because these are the guys who are going to be the first buyers. These are the guys who are going to be on social more. These are the guys who are going to get all their friends to buy the same product. It would behoove me to follow them, right? So I think everybody is trying to crack those codes in similar ways. I think that's smart. I think there's a lot of value to segmented marketing. Sometimes when we try to be too general and try to speak to everybody, we don't speak to anybody at all. I think the messages feel a little flat, a little vanilla, and nobody really feels like you're talking to them.
Do you feel like the content that you create does that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Having worked in both total market agency and at target agencies, I can see the difference. For me, the strategies have always been way sharper when you're targeting because there's usually a more dynamic problem that you have to solve. If I have to figure out how I'm going to get a very specific group of people to stop dismissing my brand and lean in, and like that's a really sharp problem. Versus, hey, let's get women to buy blah, 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 right? Like that's broad. That's, and a lot of times if you start in that really broad space, it's hard to create the work that has the nuance and the edginess to it that is going to really move somebody, right? You need some tension somewhere to make people react to it, to make people feel something. You take away all that tension and then you just kind of end up with a lot of vanilla stuff.
And speaking to that, how much of those decisions are made based on data? And then also, how much did the Black Lives Matter moment affect what you do?
Well, it didn't affect what we did at all. First, to your point, data and research, everything starts there, right? A lot of data, a lot of research. You need to know your target back and forth. You need to know the problem very thoroughly before you can come up with the perfect strategy to kind of help solve that problem, right? So that's number one. I think when it comes to Black Lives Matter, it didn't affect us at all. I think it affected the most were the people who felt guilty about their approach to maybe African-American hiring, maybe the vendors that they chose, maybe just their overall approach to how they speak to the target. All those issues popped up for people who hadn't been doing the work in the first place. For all the people who were doing the work already, it was just a another moment.
Did more companies reach out to you guys to do more targeted content, to really elevate their game to connect with consumers?
That part I wouldn't know. But I would say me on an individual basis, like there was a moment where headhunters were sending me messages every other day on LinkedIn. And I don't think any of it was real. I think it was a moment when they felt a need to, oh God, we need to interview somebody like kind of thing. I think it was that industry moment where it was a little bit of checking boxes. I think I got plenty of friends in the industry. I don't know all these people who got jobs after that moment. I don't know them. I didn't see it happen. I did not see a spike in Black hires after that moment. I saw a spike in Black interviewing, but not a spike in Black hiring. No.
The experience that you've had, what message would you give a company that's looking to be able to connect better with multiple markets, to be able to diversify their brand as opposed to doing the same thing that they've been doing for a long time?
Do the work. You can't do it with a hire. You can't go and hire a chief diversity officer, right? And like, nah, I'm done. I paid this one person. I made them the face of all of this. Now I'm done. No, it's an entire approach. It's a long-term investment in people. It's a long-term investment in a belief system. And either you have it or you don't, right? And you can't fake it. You can't fake it with one hire, one big splashy hire. You can't fake it with an email. You can't fake it with a video, that's like, oh, we love Black people. You can't fake it. You can't fake it with a tweet. You got to do the work.
Is there a company now that you see that is doing it right, that you think would be a good example for other companies?
My head is so down in work, I don't have time to like look up and like, no. You never know what's going on behind the scenes at places. I feel like the places that are doing it right, you can feel it in their messaging. You can see it in their hiring. When they take group pictures, they don't have to like fake the funk. You don't have to like, hey, janitor walking down the hallway, come get in this picture. They don't have to do that. Like it's all real, right?
It's almost like company morale would be like a pretty good identifier of if a company's doing it right or not, I guess.
You can see it in the work. You can see it in the office. You can see it. You can see it. When it's real, you can always see it. You go to the company page where they show the leadership and you can see it. When they show the employees, you can see it. When you look at the work, you can see it. You don't have to fake it when you can see it, right? When you're doing it, you can see it. When you're not doing it, that's when the shenanigans come in.
I don't know how to ask this question as like an interview, but just, I guess as a friend, like how has being Black affected you throughout your career?
That's serious?
I mean,
how has being a man affected you in your career? You know what I mean?
I mean like in terms of like there are moments where people have treated you differently or moments where you feel like you were being singled out or approached differently or addressed differently because you were Black as opposed to just a person at an advertising agency.
Here's the thing. I've been Black all my life. So I didn't become Black when I entered advertising, right? I don't silo the experiences. It's not an ad experience. It's just another experience in the day of the life of me. Have there been a lot of weird experiences? For sure. Have there been some things that have happened that like were definitely race related? Like for sure. But I think in the overall scheme of how I view the world, I don't see it as an ad moment or it's just another day in America. You have to figure out how to navigate this chessboard. Like sitting around complaining about the pieces that you have or don't have, like is not the way. It's how do you figure out how to get across that board and end up with the last piece on the board? That's the only thing to be thinking about.
What do you feel like that's been kind of the pillar of what you would define as being a successful person in advertising?
I've been really lucky, man. I've been doing this 25 years. I've never been laid off. I had a guy telling me, he was like, you're not in advertising until you get laid off. And I'm like, well, I'm not in advertising yet, so I'll take it. I hope to never be in advertising, man. I remember there was definitely a moment when I went from being kind of young and kind of just feeling my way through it to being a lot more intentional about getting to work early, staying late, getting the meetings early, attention to detail. I was always competitive. I never had a competitive problem. I think there's competing out of emotion, and I think there's being intentional. I'm going to research harder. I'm going to listen and take better notes than anybody. It's like there's all these different ways to be better at your job. It starts with the intention. Once you make that intention, it's about a series of good decision making. I remember I saw a young lady. We had a 2:00 client meeting. It was noon, and she was about to go meet her friend for this big lunch. She was, and like our client was about 40 minutes away. I'm like, it's noon. You're about to leave the office. You're probably about to drive 15, 20 minutes to meet your friend for lunch. Then you got a 40-minute drive. I'm doing the math. I'm like, the math ain't mathing. I was like, you're not going to get there. You're going to get there right before the meeting starts. Sure enough, she walked in right at the 2:00 mark or whatever, and she's trying to set up. And I remember telling her, I was like, I was here an hour before I was set up. I had already done all my tech check, went over my notes twice. I was like, you came in and you pulling out papers and you look like you scrambling. That was the difference between when I talk about intention, right? Setting the intention, when you go from being that person, because you can linger in that phase. If you linger in that phase too long, you're never going to be successful. But when you move into that more intentional space, not only does it change the way that you see yourself, it changes the way everybody else sees you. And then they start to expect it, right? And then they like, oh, he's going to be like that all the time. And now you're somebody who they can't play with, right? The minute you let everybody know that that's who you are, now everybody in your whole universe has to step up to that level anytime they deal with you, or they're going to look bad, and they know they will.
Do you ever find yourself trying to outdo yourself, or you stay at a constant the whole time?
No, man. It's I'm a big basketball fan, right? And I still play basketball. I'm a shooter, so I like to shoot. But if you don't get in the gym and put your shots up, you will lose your jump shot. You will just lose it. Same kind of thing in advertising is that, like, if you aren't constantly doing the work, there's a certain amount of input that you have to feed your brain good things. You have to read good things. You have to watch cool things. You have to constantly be researching and just finding cool things to input. And it's just kind of like working out. If you eat good foods, you will see your body change. If you put good things into your brain constantly, high quality things into your brain constantly, your brain will start to process at a higher level. It will start to process, your taste will change, right? Things that you thought were good, that's trash now. Like, I'm here now, but that's an active exercise. That's something you're constantly having to do. Like, you can't take a week off from that. You can't take 2 weeks off from that, right? It's a constant thing. And that's what I'm saying. Like, once you set the intention that this is how I want to not even work, but this is how I want to live, that's the standard.
It's probably a good time for 10 questions. But before I start it, as somebody who's in black, and I want to bring up a topic that I feel is really important, that I feel like people need to talk about, so that way other people who are experiencing a certain thing can relate to somebody who's been in another or similar situation. Mm-hmm. But I want to be able to do it in a way where I'm not offending you, but I also don't sound like an idiot.
I wasn't offended, but it's just one of these like as somebody who's always been black, you always hear in sports, right? They're like, how does it feel to be a black quarterback? Well, it's like, I've been a black dude my whole life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know anything other than that. So it's like, it's a weird kind of...
I guess the question would have been, do you feel like prejudice, racism has affected you in your life, in your workplace?
Absolutely, it has, for sure. Okay. But it's affected me, but like no more so than it's affected a lot of other people. No more than like sexism affects women, no more so than like homophobia affects gays. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, right. Everybody has hurdles that they got to deal with, right? So you can either stop and make a big deal about the hurdle, or you can live your life and learn and become a hurdler. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. So I think that's why I listen to it that way. It's like, there is no stopping, you know, regardless of what the hurdles are, you become a hurdler. You just keep moving, man.
Do you think that that's because that was the way you were raised, or is this something that you've
For
a
sure.
mantra
No,
you've set up through experience?
No. It's definitely the way I was raised. I'm Gen X, so I think that's kind of how we move. You know, it's like, okay, this ain't fair, but I'm keeping it moving. I'm pushing through. I'm seeing some younger generations that they want to stop and talk about the thing, right? They want to have a lot of chatter around the thing, and then they also want to process feelings more. We really have time to have feelings. It was about get the work done, you know? And then now, it wasn't always the healthiest choice. You know what I mean? Like working, like I work, and, you know, like a lot of us work. I had Bell's palsy once. Western medicine says that, like, oh, well, that's, you know, Bell's palsy is when half of your face shuts down. Western medicine says that's from a virus. Eastern medicine says that is stress, a sign of not expressing your emotions, a little bit of depression. They see it's an emotional thing for sure, and probably a ramification of just like constantly pushing it down, constantly just keep going, right? There's something about the younger generation that is taking a pause to self-check, which is probably good and smarter. And then there's, I think, another part where you just wish that they would fight through some things a little more.
There's a learning process in that as well.
Yeah, on both ends, right? Like, I try to show grace, try to understand, and I'm enlightened by a lot of the perspective that they have. But I think there's also that side of me that wants to see them want it more, fight a little harder too. So, but I respect the balance.
Okay, 10 questions now.
It's time for
10 questions. Is that a yes or a no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
What is one book everyone needs to read?
Oh man, I got some good choices. Today I'm gonna go with The Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. That was a real transformative book for me. If you haven't read it, check it out. It's voted one of the top 20 best examples of American literature. So, yeah, you should check that one out.
How has your work in multicultural advertising impacted your approach to creative strategy?
It's made me better at strategy because, like I said, the problems are more pointed. There's always a lot of tension in the strategies. I think from that tension comes like a lot of the best work.
What's the most rewarding project you've worked on?
I worked on the National Fatherhood Initiative for a while. I got to talk to dads who were involved in their kids' lives and dads who were not involved in their kids' lives. Hearing the differences and then trying to write ads to speak to all of these different guys on both ends, and even guys who didn't have kids of their own, but like were dating women who had kids. Man, like that felt like rewarding work. It felt like I was doing something that was like literally changing the lives of people.
That's really cool. How do you go about developing campaigns that resonate across diverse audiences?
Starts with the strategy, but then staying in tune to culture, keeping the finger on the pulse of the cultural conversations, the characters who are popping up in culture, what the cultural moments are that are happening. I think these things kind of lead you towards really good ideas and insights.
What's a major challenge you face in managing creative teams, and how do you tackle it?
In the remote world, I think just building relationships, right? We're not face to face anymore. I think it could be easy to miss the fact that somebody's a little detached when you're on a Zoom with like multiple people. It can be really easy to overlook that somebody needs a little more attention, or so, you know, I think just checking in with people, trying to make time to connect. I think connecting is still like a really big part of what we do. I think if you do make those human connections, it makes the work better. It makes the trust better. It makes the communication better.
What role does consumer data play in shaping your creative strategies?
So much. Man, from going out and talking to people to bringing people into testing facilities and asking them the hard questions and getting their POVs. Like all of that stuff matters, man. And our strategy teams do it for sometimes weeks on end to pull enough people to we have the numbers that really make a difference and can give us a real point of view.
How has co-hosting the Invisible Soldiers podcast influenced your perspective on the industry?
When Rebecca and I started that, we had a theory that there were all of these Black people in this industry that had been kind of overlooked, and we knew they all had a story, but it's not until you actually hear the stories that like the light goes on. It's like you never knew how good the stories were, really. You know what I mean? How much adversity people had fought through, how unlikely it was that they got into advertising, how amazing their advertising careers have been, the people they've touched, the things they worked on. That was inspiring for me. So I think I carry that with me every day.
Who is the one consumer audience member you dream of reaching when creating emotional or thought-provoking campaigns?
I don't know if I have a dream consumer or audience. I do think it's always fun whenever I get a chance to pitch to myself. Every now and then I get lucky enough for to be the target that we're selling to. It doesn't happen a lot. Especially doesn't happen as much as I get older, but every now and then it lines up, and those are always fun projects. I get to look at it from both sides, where I believe this, where I really buy into this. So that's always fun to try to like hack my own brain.
What's one brand campaign you admire and why?
As a child, the campaign that stood out to me more than out of all the advertising I saw, Anheuser-Busch had this thing, The Great Kings of Africa. And it was a poster series that they did. Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser, I think in particular, highlighted in the series of posters all of these great kings in Africa. It was kind of like a history lesson brought to you by Anheuser-Busch, right? Or Budweiser, I forget. Man, it was amazing. I had all the posters at home. This is the first time I ever learned about Hannibal, people like Shaka Zulu. I had never heard of these people, right? And then they did a Great Queens of Africa series 2, Isis, Nefertiti, all of these people. I had never heard of these people before. That affected me in a major way because it was the first time that I knew that a brand was speaking to me and they were trying to get a reaction out of me. I knew that. Like, this is not for Shad, right? This is for me. You know what I mean? Like, this is for me. When I became drinking age, the first thing I reached for was an Anheuser-Busch product. That's not missed on me. I don't think that that's an accident. I think a seed was planted. That became a very controversial campaign, by the way. There were teachers who were taking those posters and put them in elementary classrooms. But why is there ribbon on it or whatever? A lot of people were upset. They felt that they were targeting kids with that campaign. Were they? I don't know. Like, it made an impression on me for sure.
Do you think that a brand could do that today? Really dig into culture like that to connect with the consumer without being afraid of turning off an audience?
I think so. I think it's funny, man. You said without turning off an audience, right?
Right.
Like,
that's the reason not to do something, right?
Look, when I see Dove talking to a population of women about the women issues, and I'm not upset about that. Like, I don't feel hurt or betrayed that Dove is talking to them. Like, no, I do not. I champion those positive messages. So I feel like we live at a time now when people are a lot more nuanced, when they understand that, oh, these brands can walk and chew bubble gum too. Like they can talk to this person at the same time that they're also saying something really strong and positive to this target over here. It can all live in the same universe. We can speak to all of these different people at the same time. I think there was a time when people didn't understand that. And they felt like, how could you be talking over here to them? And then how come you're not saying the same thing to them that you're saying to me? And come on, man. Like, I think we are a little more complex now, a little bit more. We understand the nuances a little better as consumers.
So, like, what would today's version of that look like? Would it be like, a car company?
I don't know.
Taking a bunch of vehicles to a bunch of tribes in Africa and like seeing what they do with
no.
This is why you're the creative director and I'm the photographer.
It wouldn't be that, but I do think that there are ways of shedding light on things that have happened in history in very cool ways. I've seen brands do it. I've seen brands highlight different figures from history and everything. Maybe not as in, I mean, we talking in the late 70s, early 80s when that campaign was running. That was way ahead of its time and bold as hell. I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite like that, but yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And I think some brands are pointing in that space for sure.
10 questions.
What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Just keep going. And I think I already knew that. Just keep going.
What advice would you have for somebody trying to get in to being a creative director?
Keep going. Like, the only thing that makes you better are the reps. And the reps, there are easy reps, there are hard reps, there are reps that are unfair. But the more times you deal with the things, you develop those calluses that will allow you to work, just keep working through it. At a certain point, if you keep swinging the rake, your hands don't hurt anymore. That's the thing, stay at it.
Where can people find you? Someone wants to check out your work or see what you're up to.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Corey D. Seaton. You can find me on Squarespace. I think I am CoreyD-Seaton.squarespace.com. I'm on Instagram, Corey D. Seaton. I'm also on X, but I don't really do anything on X, but I'm Corey D. Seaton on X too.
And the Invisible Soldiers podcast, where's that?
Invisible Soldiers podcast is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's also on YouTube. So yeah, look us up, check us out, give us a listen.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I'm so grateful. I know they keep you super busy, so thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's a wrap.
Peace.
Just fix it in post.